Hi everyone. Welcome to episode number 12. My name is Charlotte from Cybit IT, and today, I'm here to talk to you about how to run Linux on a virtual machine in this podcast. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, Cybit IT is one of the most prominent IT companies based in Toronto, Canada. Cybit IT, with years of experience, provides a full range of remote and on-site managed IT, network support, computer help desk, cloud computing, website, app design, digital marketing, SEO, and graphic design. So let's dive into our topic. You may ask, why how to run Linux on a virtual machine is an important topic these days. You've probably heard of the term virtualization before. You might have seen it mentioned in passing as an exciting new technology that can be used to run several operating systems on a single computer simultaneously. Or maybe you even heard about virtual machines and how they're now the preferred method for running different operating systems on your computer at once. In short, you might have even heard about virtualization being utilized for the purpose of creating a virtual machine, which is essentially a software emulation of a computer. This means you can run another operating system on top of your primary OS instead of making them coexist, leaving both available simultaneously and in separate partitions with their own drives, files, programs, and everything else required to run them independently. There are several benefits to using virtualization to create multiple operating systems on one computer without them ever interfering with each other or causing any issues like duplicate files or crashes. Not only will this help keep things organized and reduce clutter by keeping your different OSes separate from each other, but it also gives you access to the same programs while protecting you from viruses or malicious software attacks, which could compromise your real OS if left unsecured. Why should you run Linux in a virtual machine? Running Linux in a virtual machine is not only a great way to experience a new operating system without making a full switch, but it also provides a safe environment to test software or new programs without the risk of damaging your main OS. It's a great option for beginners who aren't quite ready or able to make the switch from Windows or Mac OS just yet, but want to start learning how to use Linux and experience what it's like. You might also want to run Linux in a virtual machine because you want to use Linux for a specific task but still be able to use Windows for everything else. What is hypervisor-based virtualization? Virtualization is the process of creating a virtual copy of a physical computer or device. A hypervisor is a piece of software that is used to create and run virtual machines, which are software emulations of computers that can be installed and run on top of your primary operating system. This means you can install Linux or an entirely different operating system in a virtual machine on your computer without having to pay for a new computer or without having to buy a license. Virtualization is not new. But the prevalence of the hypervisor type of virtualization, rather than the emulation of specific hardware found in software such as VMware, makes it more accessible. Advantages of virtual machines. Full control over your virtual machine. You're literally able to do anything with your virtual machine that you'd be able to do on a real computer. This includes installing new software and making changes to the operating system just as you would on a real PC or Mac. You can run multiple OSes at the same time. This is a great way to experience a new operating system without making a full switch. You can install Linux or another OS on your computer and run both simultaneously in virtual machines with each in their own partition. Can be used to test software or new programs. You can test out new software before you decide to install it on your computer or run it on your primary OS. You can also test out new programs without risking the integrity of your existing computer. Run Linux on a Mac. This is perhaps one of the best reasons to run Linux in a virtual machine. You're able to run Linux on your Mac without having to install a full Linux distribution and switch to that OS. This is great if you're not quite ready to make the switch but want to experience what it's like to use Linux without having to fully commit. How to set up a Linux virtual machine on Windows 10. First, you'll obviously need to download a virtual machine software. There are a few different options out there, including options from Oracle and VMware, but the one we recommend is VMware Workstation. One of the best things about VMware Workstation is that it's completely free for personal use. But before you can start setting up your virtual machines, you'll need to download and install VMware Workstation. You can download the VMware Workstation player for free from VMware's website. After installing VMware Workstation, you'll be able to create virtual machines from Linux and other operating systems. You can also install VMware Workstation Pro if you want to be able to make more changes to your virtual machines. You'll also have to decide what distribution of Linux you'd like to install in your virtual machine. The best way to decide this is to consider what you're hoping to get out of it. If you're interested in programming, then it might be a good idea to install the Linux distribution that's most commonly used for programming. If you're interested in using Linux to host websites and other online services, then installing a Linux distribution with a web server installed might be a good idea. We'd recommend Ubuntu, Debian, or CentOS for these distributions, but feel free to research others that might be better for what you're hoping to get out of your virtual machine. Choosing a distribution to install in your VM. There are a few different options available when it comes to choosing a distribution to install in your virtual machine. If you're someone who's brand new to Linux and has never used it before, the best option would be to install Ubuntu in your virtual machine. Ubuntu is one of the most popular distributions of Linux and is considered to be beginner-friendly. That being said, Ubuntu does have a bit of a steeper learning curve than some of the other distributions of Linux out there. Debian is another great option for beginners since it's extremely similar to Ubuntu in terms of its user interface and overall design. CentOS is another popular distribution that's often used by people who are primarily interested in using Linux to host websites and other online services. You can also install Fedora or OpenSUSE if you want to try something that's a bit different from most of the other popular distributions. Installing your first virtual machine. First, you'll need to decide where you'd like to install your virtual machine. You can run it directly on your computer, create a new virtual machine on a different computer, or even on the cloud. We'd recommend creating a new virtual machine on a different computer, especially if this is your first time creating a virtual machine. That way, if something goes wrong, you won't risk corrupting your computer's OS. There are a few different options when it comes to where you'd like to install your virtual machine. If you'd like to run Linux, then VMware Workstation and VirtualBox are the two most popular virtual machine software options available. If you'd like to run Windows, you can use VMware Workstation or VirtualBox. So, at the end, I would say there are a few different options available when it comes to choosing a distribution to install in your virtual machine. If you're someone who's brand new to Linux and has never used it before, the best option would be to install Ubuntu in your virtual machine. Ubuntu is one of the most popular distributions of Linux and is considered to be beginner-friendly. That being said, Ubuntu does have a bit of a steeper learning curve than some of the other distributions of Linux out there. Debian is another great option for beginners since it's extremely similar to Ubuntu in terms of its user interface and overall design. CentOS is another popular distribution that's often used by people who are primarily interested in using Linux to host websites and other online services. You can also install Fedora or OpenSUSE if you want to try something that's a bit different from most of the other popular distributions. I once again thank you on behalf of everyone who were a part of the Cybit IT podcast for making it a great learning experience for all of us. You have genuinely infused us with hope by showing us how much potential the markets have for us. Thanks for listening to the Cybit IT podcast and stay tuned for our next exciting episode. Goodbye.